Now, my argument here is going to be that the legitimacy of an authority structure is an emergent property of the whole. How am I going to defend it? First of all, you could argue, well, but doesn't the legitimacy of a particular organization depend on the fact that the people who belong to the organization believe in that legitimacy, believe in that religious authority, or believe that the organization it has a commendable goal that they should own? Well, yes, it does. For this property not to be transcendent, it needs to depend on certain properties of the person and interactions between the persons. But the question here is this: does it depend on any particular combination of beliefs? Or does it only depend on there being some set of beliefs or another? Let me give you an example. You might go to an organization, a hospital, a prison, a school, and interview the employers as to what is, why do you think the authority of the doctor is legitimate? So, or why do you believe, why do you follow orders on a day-to-day basis in this organization? One might answer the question, well, my family has been a civil service family since I can remember. My grandfather was in civil service. His grandfather was in civil service. We have a family tradition of being civil service. We believe in civil service. That is why I am part of this bureaucracy. And that's why I believe in its legitimacy. The other one might answer, well, no, I'm not part of a civil service, long tradition family. I'm the first one. But I happen to believe in the goals of this organization. I happen to believe that we do need an organization for disaster relief. And I'm a doctor, and I believe that I can help this organization. The third person might say, hey man, I signed a contract from 9 to 5. That's the reason I obey commands. I obey commands from 9 to 5. I obey commands because they give me my weekly check. That's it. I don't even know what this organization is about. Right? But they obey commands. They obey commands. Now, the question is if we shuffle these people around and take out some of the civil service, long tradition family of civil service and replace them with 9 to 5ers, do we get roughly the same degree of legitimacy at the whole? Well, sometimes we will, sometimes we won't. But if we do, if shuffling the details at a personal level leaves the level of legitimacy roughly the same, then legitimacy is independent of the details. If we shuffle the people around and legitimacy changes completely, then legitimacy is not an emergent property. Right? Emergent properties means that even though you depend on the day-to-day interaction between these people, you don't depend on the details of who they are. Just as in the case of communities. Remember what I said before, right? In a community, you might take a poll one by one and ask them, why are you solidary with this community? One people might say, well, it gives me fuzzy feelings of togetherness. And other people might say, well, I was born altruistic. Ever since I was a little kid, my mother didn't have to tell me to share my toys with others. I would just share them. A third person might say, hey, I'm a cold, strict reciprocator. I'll do you a favor, but I expect that you're going to pay me that favor back. Right? In all three cases, solidarity is going to emerge. And so the question is, for a given community, if we shuffle people around and take some of the altruists and put some strict reciprocators, if the level of solidarity remains the same, then the level of solidarity does not depend on the details of the autobiographical details or biographical details of the persons. If by shuffling we cause a drastic change in solidarity, then solidarity was not completely emergent, okay? Because it still depends on some of the personal details. It can be reduced to the personal details. Well, the same thing with legitimacy. A bureaucracy in which everybody's a 9 to 5er might have the same level of functionality than one in which everybody comes from a long line of civil servants. Now, the long line of civil servants might be more motivated because they now have a family tradition to be part of. But if we check out the day-to-day workings of the organization and the basic level of functionality remains the same with a bunch of 9 to 5ers and a bunch of long-time civil servants, well then legitimacy is an emergent property, or the organization It depends on there being some or other beliefs about legitimacy in their staff, but not the particular details. That should be our criterion for emergence from now on. If a property of a whole depends in detail on the properties of the parts, then it is not irreducible. To the extent that the property of the whole is independent of the details, it is fully emergent. Then let me just give you one more example. In the three different forms of legitimacy that we have, charismatic, traditional, and bureaucratic, or as Weber calls it, rational legal. In the rational legal system, resources are attached to an office or to a role and not to the incumbent of that office. In other words, you can dispose of resources of the organization, you can spend the budget of the organization, you can create projects for the organization using resources that are attached to the office, but if you're replaced, then the new incumbent is the one that has control over those resources. In other words, the personal details of the incumbent don't matter that much because the resources are attached to the office. Right? So you can replace one incumbent by another incumbent. If an organization, once we studied in detail, empirically, turns out that the resources of a particular position in the hierarchy depend on the caprice or the whim of the incumbent, well then that organization, the legitimacy is not fully emergent because that person is making decisions that are entirely personal and are affecting the entire organization. Right? So in explaining how that organization works, you would have to give the details of that person. He is a very capricious person. One day he wakes up wanting to spend a lot of money. The following day he wakes up not wanting to spend any money. And that you would have to use as part of how the organization works. If you have to include the details, those personal details, then legitimacy is not fully emergent. If the resources are attached to the office or to the role, and have nothing to do with the incumbent, you replace the incumbent by another incumbent, then the personal details of the incumbent don't matter. When you explain how that organization functions, you don't have to mention the incumbent. You just have to say, there's got to be somebody there, of course, but not necessarily this one person or that other person. Okay? We had a question.